if everyone was on this call last time, this is really just meant to be kind of a informal, quick discussion. Any concerns, bring up any ideas that you have, and then we can just kind of informally chat about some ideas. And we have about a half hour to chat. That's how long the recording goes. So if anyone wants to open it up and any specific things they wanted to bring up, feel free to shoot.
Well, I found it funny that the day that I've pushed the roadmap for Ionic View, the stuff that was done and not done, you guys are merging the pull requests so I can get another commit into the library and fix all of the stuff that was pending. So thanks for the merges.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I know, Mike and Josh are working away on that to get it merged in. And so, Mike, you want to talk about that quick, about what we're going to do with Ionic View?
Yeah, sure. So we merged in support for Ion tabs. Last I checked, we're still waiting on CI for Ionic router support, which looks like it passed. So feature view, we'll commit that right now, actually, after the end of this call. So once that's in, I think the goal is we'll ship probably a alpha later today. And then I'm going to update the conference app for Ionic View. So that'll be out soon. And I think this is going to be the time where we will want to see some people trying it out, getting us feedback, similar to with how React is right now, where we want the feedback. We want all the any issues that you guys might see with it. So that way we can just fix it, make it better, and get it closer to final.
Yeah, so from what I understand, the API is pretty stable, right? With pending these final merges, it's more of now at this beta phase, just getting more people practical testing on it, and then for us to do more documentation around it. And I know that there's a bunch of updates going to the docs right now with more like framework integration switching within our docs. Cam's shipping that right now, so we should see some significant improvements to, like, if you're using Vue, if you're using React or Angular within our docs. Should help out a lot.
Yeah, and with that, the next probably big thing after just docs, it will be the CLI integration and making sure that if you're coming from, obviously with the Ionic CLI and an Angular project, it's kind of first-class citizen, and Vue and React are not necessarily in that same boat. So we want to make sure that Vue CLI, or like Vue is a proper CLI project. You can run Ionic start -- template or type equals Vue and have that work, and also be able to take a Vue project and run Vue add Ionic, and it would automatically handle that the same way you can do it with Angular's ng add. So that's already written. I'm just waiting on the package name to be transferred over from NPM, because people are squatting on it. So we'll once that's finished up and we get that, we will have options for people to add Ionic who already have a Vue project, or people to start a new Ionic Vue project from scratch.
Sweet.
And then obviously the same thing would go for React as well.
I guess I could talk a little bit about SSR and where that's at right now. So much, or if not all, of the refactoring is done within Stencil. Ionic itself had a few updates to not use window and document in a few areas. They were actually pretty smaller updates that we need to do. A lot of that stuff is already fixed up as far as Ionic is concerned, but now Stencil is able to, at least on my machine, it's able to find Ionic components and hydrate them into a flat tree, even if it's using web or Shadow DOM. And then when the browser kicks in, the JavaScript finally downloads and executes, it'll then transform those nodes into an actual shadow root, without any flicker, with still, even though styles were written in a flat tree, and then it was transformed into Shadow DOM. All that stuff happens under the hood without a flicker. That's the important part for us. And so, yeah, that should come out in Stencil 1 here in the next few weeks, which is then going to immediately trickle down into Ionic. And so at that level, Stencil is able to take any Stencil component and hydrate it, and it becomes like this app that you can use to hydrate your components, to which then Ionic Angular would use that app to provide its own Angular Universal module. And so that means for Angular users, all you would have to do is, if you're already having an Angular Universal module for either pre-rendering or your server-side rendering module, you would then also just import the Ionic Serve module. And that would really be the only additional thing you'd have to do to make Ionic components be able to hydrate.
Is that what we're calling it for the final module name? Because I saw Ionic Server module, then Ionic Hydrate module. I got to update
I don't know.
them.
I think on the drive in, I decided to go back to a server module just because Ionic or Angular Universal uses serve, the word serve in their modules. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Ionic Serve module, Ionic Hydrate module. This will be the determining factor.
What about Ionic Universal module?
Darn it, we need a third option.
I mean, I think if Angular uses serve, that's obviously a good rationale for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with serve. Sounds better.
Okay, cool.
There we go.
Done.
Asif, did you want to give like a quick overview on some of the router stuff?
Yeah, I was just waiting for the next opening there. But hi guys, this is my first Ionic leaders meeting. I missed the last few, just been tied up with stuff. But my name is Asif Rahman. I'm an architect at Ultimate Software. And so router issues. In Ionic Angular, there's been couple of issues that have been open for a while on GitHub, one of which is related to router links not working after you leave a page and come back to it. We also faced this same kind of problem when we were implementing our app. And there's also some other problems that are all kind of related to the same underlying root issue. For example, it's very common in Angular apps to subscribe to query param changes or param changes while you're on a component. And same kind of weird side effect where when you're first on the page, everything works as expected. But then the second you navigate to another page and then pop back to the page that you were already on, none of the observables fire anymore. It's all kind of relating to the same root issue, which is when in a regular Angular app, when a component gets instantiated into an outlet, it gets passed in an activated route in its injector. And when you leave that component, it gets destroyed. When you come back to it, it gets recreated and it gets another fresh activated route put in and everything works hunky-dory. But in Ionic, because we're doing this nice, kind of stack controller where we keep our cache views and just use an existing view to get the nice back animations and stuff. Because of that, when a view that's coming from an existing view gets put into place, a component gets put into place, there's no mechanism that's updating that activated route in any way. So it's still referencing the old activated route from when it was first created. And therefore, anything that relies on activated route, like relative links or observables and stuff like that, they're all kind of broken at that point. So I have a branch that I put out yesterday that kind of shows it's like a hacky workaround where instead of using the activated route that's injected, we're using this other service that provides a stream of activated routes. And it kind of highlights that if we were to use that, everything kind of works. So it's kind of just like a proof to show that the underlying problem is actually the problem. And if we were to somehow keep that activated route up to date in a way, then it kind of would solve all of these routing issues that we have related to activated routes. So I was talking to Mike and Liam about a potential activated route proxy object that we would inject instead. And because we're injecting our own proxy, we can then maintain it during the life of that component in the stack, and we can push new values to its observables or what have you. So we kind of just hijack at that point, and we pass our own proxy for an activated route, because otherwise, because of how object references are, there's no way you can just reassign the activated route later, because anyone that was binding to it before that would still be binding to the old object, right? So you would have memory leaks and it still wouldn't work. So I think this is a potential. So I'm going to work on a POC on that. Probably take a couple of days to play with and see how that works out. But it would be awesome to get some people to help maybe test that out afterward to make sure things don't break. I can write a couple tests to show that the problems that we were facing are now fixed, right? But we want to also make sure we didn't really introduce any regressions and stuff on that. But I think it would be a huge, huge win for a lot of the routing issues. There's another interesting routing issue where we had to stop using the Ionic back button because of the way that it calculates your back view is using the URL that's on the stack for that view, but there's nothing that updates and maintains that URL either. So in our app, we use query params a lot for filtered views and stuff. So if you're sitting on a component and you say change the query params, there's nothing that's updating the URL value on your stack, and therefore when you leave that page and then you use the back button, it doesn't match up anymore because you kind of mutated that URL and stuff. So that's another interesting one that I was going to, talk about after we solve this first problem and see if we can get that next, because the solutions kind of piggyback off of each other, which is kind of neat.
Sure. Yeah, this is great. This is awesome. Thanks a lot for digging really into this of what the issues were. So, so I invited Liam on here, and it sounds like you guys have already been talking a little bit. But yeah, I know that we're just wrapping up some date time fixes right now, and getting those PRs wrapped up and getting them in the master. And then Liam was going to take on the routing stuff. So having you guys start chatting and figuring out what the next steps are, that'd be awesome, and we can definitely. Really, it's very important to get this solved. I think it's very high priority. So that's awesome that you've already kind of helped us out there, and we can help you out from word.
Yeah, we've done a little bit of a deep dive with both Liam and myself to understand where all the issues are and where it exists in terms of, does it exist in Angular land or Ionic land, and where that transition point is. So I think it's between all three of us. I think we have enough brain power to will it to be.
Our powers combined.
Yeah, yes. We form one functioning developer. So we'll be able to, hopefully we'll get that squared away and do it in a way that will be just a patch release versus any kind of major release or minor release. So that should be
awesome.
Good to have. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully they're just bug fixes. And then also, if we can, you mentioned unit testing. If we can definitely fix this with unit tests in the Angular directory, that'd be awesome to just prove that we were good to go. Because my fear is, as we make, because Ionic router does extend the Angular router, and we can make it work today. My fear would be that tomorrow Angular router, whatever version comes out, it breaks whatever we did.
And that's definitely with one that proxy solution that I'm kind of talking about there. That is the biggest fallback to that solution, is that if there are any breaking changes to activated route on Angular, we are now tightly coupled to that, and we would have to maintain the code for that, which is kind of.
Yeah, this is a good thing to bring up, possibly.
Actually, now that we said it, I think I have a solution that'll actually make it dynamic enough so that it wouldn't.
Yeah, the less we use Angular, the better.
For sure. Well, and then this solution is definitely for the Ionic Angular piece, though. It's not not in core at all.
Yep. No, absolutely. I mean, absolutely, we need to use Angular router, and there's going to be Angular router APIs we're touching, but the less of them we touch, the better.
For sure.
Cool. Yeah, this is awesome. This is I don't know, Liam, if you had anything else to add, but yeah, this is definitely our next big focus to be closing out these issues.
Yeah, I'm definitely super grateful that you can hop in and help us out with that.
Definitely. Yeah. When I have something like that is POC and working, I'll hand it over to you so you can like definitely like review, pick it apart, see what makes sense, and we can take it from there.
Cool.
I think the next thing that I want to bring it up just to kind of put it on people's radars, and I know, Adam, we've talked about this, is virtual scroll.
Yeah.
Yeah. So virtual scroll is really tough. So I think we've kind of fallen online, and Adam, correct me if I misstate anything, but with some of like the Angular CDK virtual scroller, I think as we start to go out and expand in these framework specifics, like into the different frameworks, it makes more sense to use things in the particular framework than for us to constantly ship our own solution. So it's like Angular CDK scroller would be the go-to and what we would recommend for Ionic apps or Ionic Angular apps. And then React would have the same thing for Ionic React and same thing for Ionic Vue. You just use the framework-specific virtual scroll implementation.
Yeah, I think just like with router, there's two components within all of Ionic that have this issue, and that'd be router and virtual scroll. In that it's the framework, the overarching application framework that controls the data, and it controls adding and removing DOMs, updating DOM elements, things like that. Whereas all the rest of Ionic is really just leaf nodes, like a checkbox and an item. Really, it's just rendering what the framework told it. But when it comes to virtual scroll, it's very dependent on the data that the framework is in control of. And so with the current virtual scroll, which was really built for Ionic 2, worked in Ionic 3, and kind of works for Ionic 4, is that it's not, again, the issue that it has is that the framework controls the data. And so it trying to pass it to some web component and then have the web component try to figure out the data. That's the one area I think that it breaks down with our current implementation. And great timing with Angular CDK virtual scroll. And then basically it's largely what our virtual scrolls does, but it's they put more time into theirs. So that works out for us. And I think where it helps us out is that that's a very brittle section of a framework. And so specifically, I wrote the original virtual scroll, and it really gets in the weeds of how NG4 works and how TrackSY works, and how there's just so much that is very brittle in that area. So to kind of have the framework take care of it is going to really help us out there. And so the same thing would go for React and Vue. We need to put some research into what would be best for React and Vue, but I think it's going to follow kind of the same pattern to what Angular does. And so our current virtual scroll works. It works fine. I don't think it works great. And so I think we're just going to leave it in and recommend, this route of using the framework's choice, whatever our recommendation per framework is. And Angular would be Angular CDK. So I don't know if anyone had any feedback.
I have a question. How would that work with stencil-based apps or Ionic Core?
Oh, right. So in that case, that's where it does work well. So like in Stencil, normally Stencil is just a web component. But in the case of you're using Stencil to build Ionic, and you're using Stencil to build like the Ionic conference app, then you can kind of consider Stencil as a one-for-one to what Angular and React is. Not always the case, but in that case it is. And so that version of the virtual scroll does work well because it is controlling the data. It is in charge of the array or the objects it's looping through. And so then I think the virtual scroll component would stay for that reason. Like it's a core component. But if you're in framework land, then it's a framework component. So this is definitely something we need to clear up.
Right, and like if you look at we have a integration test for virtual scroll in the core directory of the Ionic repo, and it goes through like if you want to just do that, it doesn't necessarily even need to include Stencil. Like if you were just to do it from a purely JavaScript approach, because virtual scroll or the Ion virtual scroll is in charge of how to render everything, it can do it a lot more efficiently Then if we were to try to make it all work, kind of, all right, well, Angular handles this data, and then we pass it down to Virtual Scroll. Why don't we just, and then we have to make sure that Virtual Scroll can handle it. It gets a lot of passing things across where we could just call it directly inside of a core app or a regular JavaScript app.
At least that's our latest thinking in this. And we need to put a bit more research into React and Vue for sure. And I know we've got a proof of concept with Angular Universal, or Angular, keep calling it Universal, CDK working well. And yeah, I think that kind of convinced us that we should just go that route. But that said, Ionic Virtual Scroll is still just a web component, and it can just take an array of data and it would know what to do. So if you're using it that way, then it's still just fine. We probably have some bugs that need to be fixed, but like I think that would be the recommendation for just a raw web component of Virtual Scroll. That would still work. Any other questions or anything?
I've got a quick one. When working on the refactor of the Vue router, I was trying to implement the appear attribute, which basically in Vue transitions allows for a transition to fire whenever you just land on the page. So maybe perhaps some people would like to show the beautiful transitions when the app loads. But I found a weird bug where when you call the component on ready and the resolved value is always null, unless you set a timeout of 1 millisecond, then it returns the hydrated element.
Is that from the very first load, like immediately?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would tell me that Vue itself is very synchronous, and everything has executed. So it's in that very first paint, very first execution of Vue. Meanwhile, the web components are still like lazy loading themselves in, or even the lazy loaded, the script itself hasn't loaded itself in yet to even say that I'm lazy loaded, if that makes sense. So it's, it's a problem today. I think this will be less of a problem in the future because we'll always be using asynchronous JavaScript modules. So like all the frameworks, and Stencil's already doing this, is where we're moving to using the script type module, which is asynchronous always, which would avoid this issue where like ES5 code runs first, and then secondly, ES6 or ES module code runs, asynchronously a couple frames or a tick later, is kind of where the issue stems from. That doesn't mean it's not solvable, but that would explain why like the set timeout says that it's ready when it wasn't that first kind of execution.
Yeah, so it wasn't like the component on ready is not defined on the element. It's just the return value of that is null.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe in the future I'll create a pull request to have that as a solution for now. It is a nice feature though.
Yeah. So another thing is the define custom elements function. You know which one I'm talking about with I'm sure Vue does call it too. It returns a promise, and it returns when all of Ionic is ready. And so in Ionic Angular, for the Ionic module, we have the app initializer. And the app initializer will wait on when you say when it's done waiting. And so that's what the return promise is used for. Maybe the Vue version isn't doing something like that, where it's telling Vue to just wait a tick until Ionic is all set up and then continue.
Well, I was trying to use the Vue's next tick method, which basically waits for the DOM to start rendering, but still it wasn't fixed.
Okay.
It set timeout for some reason, did the trick.
Yeah, I'd be curious, like wherever that, waiting until.
We can look into this as part of like this the beta and this early like alpha right now. So we don't have to necessarily have the answer right at the moment.
No, it wasn't more of it.
It's a good thing to keep an eye on, though, like to have that, be aware of it.
It's not impacting anything really that much. It's just this one small feature that I wanted
Just
to.
the animations, I can imagine this also being an issue like inside of Angular with Angular animations when the component first renders and then being able to do like animations on hosts.
Yeah, in that case, I mean, because Angular itself, like the entire Angular app, would wait on Ionic to be ready, which is really like a half millisecond. But either way, it's asynchronous. That shouldn't be a problem in Angular. So, but I could see where this is a problem in Vue is because it's probably not waiting for Ionic to be ready. But yeah, so if it's working in Angular, it should work in Vue too. So we can probably help out with that to see where is it not waiting.
Cool. I can create an example or something to send you guys so you can see what I was doing there.
Yeah, we would appreciate that.
Right.
Cool. I think we are getting close on time here, so let's we'll try to wrap things up. But thank you everyone for joining and hanging out and sharing some stuff. We'll try to do these again maybe in a month or so and see where we go. But yeah, we'll see you all on Slack.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.